You just leave it here?
Yeah, you just leave it there. The mic's on the table, so if you're around it, you should be able to hear it. It doesn't matter if you can really see your screen because you can see it all like on the live. So it's okay if you're like in front of it a little bit, just so you know.
All right.
All right.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to Midgard Adventure in Kolsvöllur, Iceland. For the past 6 days, our students on the Green program have been studying renewable energy innovation all over Iceland, looking at the challenges for sustainable development and some of Iceland's solutions and some future solutions to these problems. And in doing so, our students have been working on 3 different projects in sustainable development. They'll each be presenting for 15 minutes, and then there will be about 5 to 10 minutes with questions for each of the groups. And let's get started, okay? Good. All right. So, Reventus, you're starting.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Break away.
Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're dialing in from. Thank you all for joining us. You guys have to be closer to the
Closer.
All
right.
We're all going to huddle around the microphone. Thank you all for joining us. We are Reventus, which takes the word for wind in Latin, ventus, and reinvents it to demonstrate how our nonprofit consulting model is going to focus on reimagining the future one wind turbine blade at a time. Next slide, please. My name is Claire Weiner. I studied environmental engineering.
My name is Pablo Salazar. I'm doing a master's in environmental management.
And my name is Alice Lynn. I major in mechanical engineering.
My name is Leo Lichte, and I'm studying sustainable business transformation.
My name is Grace Baffer, and I'm a sustainability and built environment major.
My name is Kelly Shuda, and I studied a double major in environmental studies and education.
Could you all sort of stand in such a way that
Stand a little to the side.
Yeah, I mean,
so
sure.
you're not in the middle of
You can see the screen, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Keep going, please.
And then I guess
That's
we could,
perfect. If you don't go any further than this, this is perfect.
Yeah.
you could just take turns being in front.
Okay. So a little overview of our presentation. We will first introduce our topic, then discuss our golden circle, then touch on the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals that go along with our topic, our sustainability complex, recycling methods, policy involved, extended producer responsibility, what that is and how we'll use it, our metric of success, as well as challenges and considerations.
So, before going into what Reventus is all about, here is basically our project background. So currently, about 17,000 turbines are set to retire in the next 10 years, and currently wind farms do not have a sustainable strategy on what to do with these wind turbine blades for the following challenges. So first of all, wind turbine blades are made of a stronger chemical bond, which makes them harder to break down compared to metals and woods. And secondly, with wastelands being so cheap, wind farms just end up dumping their wind turbines into these wastelands field, which creates a huge sustainability problem.
So our golden circle, why this is a problem, how we will go about solving it, and what that looks like. So at the center of our golden circle is our why. At the core of our mission is to reduce the material impact of wind energy while increasing public support for the technology. How we're going to do that is by focusing on facilitating the deployment of innovative end-of-life management for wind turbine blades. What that looks like is building recycling partnerships between customers and suppliers while driving policy change. And we aim to include wind energy within a circular economy. all while addressing this overarching question in renewable energy: what happens to wind turbine blades at the end of their lifespan?
So the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, that we'll cover in our presentation will be number 3, which is good health and well living, which is preventing microplastics to be in the environment, and another one is
All right, so for our sustainability complex, we first have decided to focus on the US because that environment has seen a lot of wind turbine deployment, but not necessarily any movement in the recycling space yet. And then within the US, we did an analysis here of we used a database of all turbines that have been installed in the US and analyzed how many states have a higher percentage of turbines that are closer to end of life. So we define that as over 15 years old. And we found that while certain states, like Texas, for instance, have a lot of wind turbines, there are a couple of more states where there are a higher percentage of old turbines. That includes California as the highest, up to 60% of their turbines. Also states like Minnesota, Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and New Mexico. These are all states where we also anticipate there being a favorable policymaking environment because a lot of these states are more left-leaning, whereas currently the federal policy landscape in the US may be less favorable or inclined toward wind turbine blade recycling.
Going a little further into the blades end-of-life pathways. So as for right now, the most common end-of-life methodology is taking the blades to a landfill. This is a cheap alternative, although it's what we are trying to avoid. And we are trying to migrate to the lower side of these schematics, looking into repurposing a certain amount of the blades into playgrounds, bridges, and utility poles, among other options. This is going to take a major toll and major impact into the blades, the image people have towards wind energy. So we want to underline this section. But we really see most of the blades going straight to our recycling systems. Here we are mentioning a couple of recycling methods, including mechanical grinding, which is a cheap and not so energy intensive alternative, although it hinders the mechanical properties of the materials, especially the fibers. Also, we have high voltage pulse fragmentation. This is an electromechanical process. It also has some scalability issues, although there might be some interest applications. Then we have solvolysis, which uses chemical solvents to decompose the material. But we basically are focusing mainly in pyrolysis. Doing our research, we deem this the most prominent methodology to recover the materials from the blades. This is basically a high temperature thermal degradation in the absence of oxygen. And we saw that the Department of Energy is already financing Carbon Rivers, institution based on Tennessee that's looking into recycling these materials. Going a little further into the building community trust, this is the repurposing of the blades part that we were talking about. We see that adding these blades into common public spaces is going to have a major positive impact on how people envision and think about wind. We know that the end-of-life management is one of the biggest drawbacks from the development of wind power. So we really want to be clear and transparent with the communication of where the blades are actually going, and just have a major positive impact on the way people think about this.
So, our business model, Reventis, is a nonprofit consulting organization. So basically think of us as a middleman between the wind turbine suppliers and customers, easing their process of wind blade recycling. Our major fundings will come from interested investors, such as the International Finance Corporation, and our major customers and partners will be recycling facilities such as Carbon Rivers, Veolia, wind farm owners, and wind turbine suppliers, as well as government agencies such as the U.S. Department of Energy and California commissions, with our first target area being California. And a way for us to reach out to these organizations, Reventis will be attending the wind energy trade fairs, where is a perfect spot for them to gather, so a lot of fish in the sea. And our cost structure is pretty simple. Reventis is a nonprofit organization, so we do not have surplus. We will majorly allocate our expenditures to building our public presence, such as social media platforms, and to create a stable working environment, such as our salaries, benefits, and other utilities, such as travel expenses. And all, Reventis has a strong value proposition. When customers choose Reventis, they are not only solving our sustainability problems, but also build their brand image. With the controversy of wind energy going on, being a business that invests in the sustainability of the afterlife of their products is already a huge step ahead of their competitors, because people will think, oh, this company is already doing all the right things, they're so cool, and basically it is a huge breakthrough for our partners.
All right. In addition to the end-of-life blade management consulting services we will be providing, we will also be focusing on policy and advocacy opportunities in those target states that we mentioned. Some examples of policies that we will be advocating for, including policy mandates at the state level that retiring wind farms pursue approved end-of-life management programs, and we can help policymakers vet different management programs to ensure that the blades are actually getting recycled. Another example of state-level support is financing for recycling methods via a fee. This could be levied on, for instance, fossil energy resources within the state. Given that recycling methods, or a lot of them are still early stage, they need that upfront financial support to get costs down.
Yes, so as we were looking into the existing system and how to improve it, we came across the current responsibilities, which is, I mean, right now we have an investor or customer that is buying a wind farm, and he gets the turbine plus a full service agreement, which is the FSA. This investor would then sell his energy to the energy provider with a power purchase agreement, which is the PPA, and this energy goes then to the consumer. So the problem with this system right now is that the recycling part is under the customer responsibility. So therefore we have hundreds of customers that can do whatever they want with the blades after the lifetime of approximately 25 years per turbine. So we have an uncontrolled blade disposal depending on customer investor decisions. So they can choose if they either want to recycle it for more money or just bury them somewhere. Can you press the next slide? So we had the idea to implement the already existing extended producer responsibility into this field. So it's basically about the supplier being responsible for the blade recycling and not the customer anymore. So we had the idea to, make them responsible for it, so that all blades would be recycled through a recycling firm, would go back to the supplier in optimum case to, close the loop of the circular economy. So as this will require more money for the supplier, we had the idea to implement the circular FSA, which is basically the already existing FSA plus some money on top that would cover then the cost for the supplier to recycle the blades. That would then affect the investor, and that he's not in the minus. We had the idea to create a circular PPA, which would then be subsidized by the government through gray energy, which is fossil energy, coal energy. So this was the idea that we had to do both, basically close the circular economy side here, and also to bring investors here more in the direction on investing in green energy. So otherwise they would have to pay more tax for green and gray energy. Without having any impact on the consumer. So coming to numbers, we just calculated, we looked up, so the average FSA full service agreement costs are $20 per kilowatt per year in average. So we were calculating how much this will be for a wind turbine from the market right now, which is around 4 megawatts. So it would cost like $80,000 per year for a wind turbine for the full service agreement that the customer needs to pay anyway. And we calculated how much it would be if we would include the blade recycling into the FSA. So we then calculated a lifespan of 25 years with recycling costs of $60,000 for 3 blades, which would then be $2,400 per year. So to bring this down to this initial kilowatt price, this will be $20.06 per kilowatt per year, which represents a 3% increase in the FSA price.
So our success will be measured by a few key metrics. Firstly, calculating the quantitative mass of wind turbine blades diverted from landfills. Secondly, the reduction of raw materials by integrating recycled blade materials into new production. We want to make sure to lower the footprint of the entire supply chain there, as well as tracking the number of favorable policies passed. This is super important in creating an environment for change like this to be able to happen. And lastly, tracking that there's a favorable view of wind energy in the U.S. among the public. Right now, there is many concerns about the material waste, so we hope that by mitigating the material waste of wind turbine blades, this will gain more support and trust of the public in terms of wind energy, but also renewable energy as a whole.
Some possible challenges and considerations we need to think about include low landfilling costs. Is very cheap to just landfill all your waste. And another challenge that we have is non-recyclable elements of pre-existing blades. This will be very difficult to challenge as we go forward in this project. Some environmental considerations include ensuring blades are actually getting recycled and proper and at least impactful disposal of non-recyclable material. And some ethical considerations for all the stakeholders involved. We don't want to greenwash as well as green hush. And we want to try to be as transparent about our sustainability objectives as clear as possible. So in short, we believe our wind turbine recycling nonprofit can help the planet, people, and profit through our golden circle, our applied SDGs, and as well as our business model. So we hope you can join us in our sustainable future.
We have some questions. First off, Jake would like to congratulate you. Great presentation, despite the difficulties.
It all streamed online though,
Yeah.
so
Perfect.
seamless
Okay.
online.
Perfect. But what do you see being the biggest challenge with this idea? Be it technical, political, or something else?
So right now in the U.S., the wind industry is definitely facing several headwinds. The new presidential administration, increasing costs due to inflation, supply chains. So anything that increases the cost, like blade recycling, could be really difficult for wind energy developers to want to pursue. So that's why we focused on states where there's probably a more favorable state level policy environment, like California, as well as companies who might want to boost their brand image. We talked about that. Who might want to kind of go above and beyond in terms of pursuing recycling as part of their FSA.
Yeah, and adding a little to that, the U.S. being such a large country with so much available landfilling is going to remain a cheap alternative. So we need to address this on a regulatory scheme that bolsters the recycling pathway instead of landfilling.
Yeah, that's great. And for some part of the country, where you do have that like regulatory framework, I think that's that would be very helpful. Do you think that in like in an environment, I know like Oklahoma is building huge wind farms, but maybe doesn't have as much government incentives on the recycling side of things? Do you think that this agency would still be able to work with those companies that are building wind farms in Oklahoma to have some more financial incentives for just like supply chain, or do you think that this is really limited to places that have a government to support it?
I think that on the early stages of our operation, we want to focus on the low-hanging fruit. Focus on the markets, as you mentioned, that have the regulatory support. It's going to be easier. But we do keep in mind that this is an evolving market. The regulations, the administrations are going to be changing. So as a company, we want to stay on top of that, as well as the development and research on the technical side to find new opportunities and just offer our services where we can add value.
Yeah. And looking into the future, I mean, institutions like the IFC, which is part of the Global World Bank, basically look into green financing. So if you explain that you would need this kind of money for a recycling initiative, they would, sponsor this as well. So.
One other thing to keep in mind is in more red states like the one you mentioned, we're seeing the wind turbine end-of-life issue being a key source of local opposition against wind turbines. So we did mention how recycling there, maybe there wouldn't be policy support, but it could build more local support for wind turbines, knowing that the blades are not a big end-of-life issue.
Very good answer. Thank you for that.
Great presentation. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very well done. I have a question. You did mention both repurposing and recycling, but when it comes to environmental impact, which has a bigger impact, recycling or repurposing?
At the end, the repurposing is gonna end up being recycled as well. The repurposing side is more into just using the blade in different applications, and once that happens and the blade doesn't have any other use, we can then direct that into recycling, hoping to extract the most value out of the materials that we use, and also reduce the raw materials impact on the new blades.
Are there any questions from the other students?
Is there anything interesting or fun you found out that you could fit into your presentation that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, you can create sport boats out of wind turbine blades.
Really?
Yeah.
You can create what?
Boats. Sport boats.
Boats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also found that we can also create playgrounds because this is made out of the same carbon fiber material. And there was an article about that being done in the Netherlands, so that was kind of fun.
Right behind you.
Do you think the interdisciplinary nature of the team helped, didn't help, or how did you feel about that in the aspect of presentation, finding all your data and all that?
I mean, yeah, I feel like diversity always adds up. We have 3 nations represented in our team with different backgrounds, and it was interesting to hear the perspective and insights from the different team members, trying to build a presentation that touches different topics according to our expertise and experience. thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we think it's fixed?
Or is there a way to get speakers up on here, or should I just have my
I think you should have their
Yeah, it was. It really was.
Yeah, me too.
You are this one. Wunderbar. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, during this time it was. It's like, yeah.
He said so, but this was the stuff.
Now we can just enjoy the show.
There's
You guys can stand in front of the screen.
Okay.
If like the desk is there for you to see, just try not to like spread out too much more.
Good, I can put that better. Okay. All right.
Okay, do we want to, I can run the computers, and then speakers can sort of swap locations?
I mean, I could see from here.
You swap a lot. So
Yeah, put yours over here and then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's a speaker.
This is the microphone, this is the speaker notes, this is our presentation.
Okay.
Cool. Great.
From servers to seedlings, data center heat recovery for community agriculture.
Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Sophia Carson. I am a junior at NC State University, dual majoring in chemical engineering and economics.
Hi everyone, I'm Emmeline Beester. I go to Lawrence University and I'm double majoring in chemistry and geology.
Hey everyone, I'm Turks Quincy, go by TK, majoring in chemical engineering at NC State University.
My name is Alexandra Olenek. I'm currently studying sustainability studies at the University of Florida, South Florida.
I'm Magree Wong. I graduated from Rochester Institute of Technology, studied environmental sustainability and management entrepreneurship.
My name is Dana. I study biomedical sciences at UCF.
So a brief overview about what we'll be covering in this presentation. First, we'll go over an introduction to data centers. We'll cover our golden circle, we'll touch on sustainable development goals, the sustainability complex, then go into our business model and the process of getting thermal energy from data centers to local community greenhouses and potential future applications of this technology and our company.
To quickly introduce what data centers are, they are a large building consisting of a network of computers. They mainly store AI data, company data, and they are projected to grow 19 to 22% annually, and currently they take up 3.7% of the U.S. shared power. They're also projected to take up 11.7% in 2030.
A little more trends about data centers are here. The energy demand is planned to double in the next 10 years that Dana saw about before, and upwards of 50%, a notable statistic is upwards of 50% of the energy use in data centers is used for cooling, depending on the data center configuration, liquid cooling, air cooling, etc. Also, 0.9 to 1.3% of total energy demand is data centers, like of all the energy that's used, and is expected to grow. And finally, according to the International Energy Agency, right now, well, in 2022, the energy that data centers took was 200 terawatt hours of energy, and by 2030, it's planned to have to take 400 terawatt hours of energy.
Moving on to our golden circle. Our why is to repurpose wasted resources, conserve energy, support the local community, and address economic inequalities. Our how is by creating incentives to reduce thermal pollution and use existing hot air from community-based heating systems. And what? We're a consulting company that repurposes wasted heat from air cooling data centers.
So for our sustainable development goals, we're focusing on a few different goals. Firstly, industry, innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, and responsible consumption and production. And these all speak to our general why of the Golden Circle, which involves recycling what is currently a wasted resource in a sustainable manner. Also, we're focusing on the sustainable goals of zero hunger and good health and well-being. And these speak more to the usage of waste heat for new infrastructure, such as a greenhouse, which studies have shown can have a great impact on community and individual health and well-being, and also reduce hunger.
So moving on to the sustainability complex, we're mostly making our impact on the community level, redirecting wasted heat from air cooling data centers to give back to the community. For example, using that heat for a greenhouse, maintaining that temperature, and we can bring partners together for the community garden and addressing some of the food desert issues since we're bringing fresh produce back to the local community. On the city level, we're looking to redirect heat for further applications, such as for district heating, and reducing some of the energy consumption that the city would need from heating the water from like cooler temperatures, since we're already using the wasted heat to bring up that water temperature. And since data centers are going to grow, putting more strain on the heat, on the energy for the city, we would help in reducing that.
Looking at some of our key resources, we're going to need some outreach managers to communicate with our partners. We're also going to have a marketing and finance team. Looking at our key activities, we're going to be utilizing thermal energy from data centers as a source of heat for the community. We're also going to implement just more sustainable practices in general. Looking at some of our key partnerships, we're going to be partnering with existing greenhouses and farmers within the community, and community organizations and leaders.
Moving on to the segments and channels, our customers will be the air-cooled data centers that utilize free cooling methods and want to utilize their waste heat, and also potential other expansions to similar industries that have similar heat generation tactics. And our beneficiaries will be data centers because we're utilizing their excess heat, and the greenhouses as we'll be using that excess heat to heat the greenhouses. And then our channels will be kind of plan to lead by example. We plan to start with a pilot to our project to show we're capable of the work and can do it, and hopefully from there get other work. And then of course the connections. The plan is to recruit heavily from data centers, people who work at data centers, to have that as our market to work with in the future for other projects.
In terms of our value proposition, our big value comes from optimization of data centers. This is how we're going to make money. We're going to optimize the data centers, and this is how we're going to connect and make those important connections with the data centers. In terms of public image, we will be forming connections between big tech, local governments, and the community. So that's another added bonus to these data centers. And the bonus for the greenhouses is reduced heating and energy costs for the greenhouse itself.
So these are suggestions that our consulting firm has for optimization of these centers. One being water use management. So 51% of data centers track their usage, but only 10% of the ones that track their usage track across all facilities. So data centers, they require clean water to cool down their servers due to antimicrobials or particles causing corrosion effects. And they also require water for employee-based uses like restrooms or drinking water. So requiring data centers to report on their water usage would be really valuable to find avenues to see where individual optimization can take place, such as employee usage or finding avenues that we can incorporate air cooling or recycling the water back into the centers. Another aspect is building designs. So a rack-based cooling system allows for a precise cooling to each individual rack, which really helps optimize the energy used to cool these racks. And the back of the racks facing each other also allow for an efficient collection of hot air in the figure. And location can also be very valuable to optimizing energy. So centers in colder climates, they require less energy and allow for the opportunity of less water usage, and incorporate the possibility of more air use. And the drawback with this is that data centers are typically located close to the companies that use them, close to the companies. So in hotter climates, this can be an issue. And what we would do is help companies strategically place their corporations so in mindfulness of where their data centers will be located.
Perfect. So moving on to the economics, our cost structure, we would have tax write-offs. So data centers would receive tax deductions for charitable contributions, for the waste repurposing, for community gardens. They would get a small revenue stream from the greenhouses themselves. The community gardens would pay a minimal heat usage fee to the data centers, creating a sustainable loop that doesn't put additional burden on the greenhouse. City grants, initial greenhouse setup costs could be offset by local government grants aimed at promoting urban agriculture and sustainability. Looking into the future, we hope for something like cogeneration policy incentives inspired by Jimmy Carter era policies, incentivizing and rewarding efficient energy use and waste heat recovery. In terms of feasibility today, many data centers are already exploring ways to become more sustainable, and with the right legislative push, data centers could become incredible contributors to local communities. And EU data centers with a capacity of 1 megawatt and above already must utilize their waste heat recovery. So not too crazy of a policy.
Now going to the process of some of what we're doing. It's important to note that for the greenhouse project specifically, we'll be using free-cooled data centers, and this is a graphic here, showing that taking cold air in from the ambient nature, and then expelling hot exhaust air into the atmosphere. Our plan is to take advantage of this hot exhaust air stream, and then reroute that for the greenhouses for that temperature. That temperature range for the exhaust stream is usually between 20 and 27 degrees Celsius, and it's important to note that free-cooled data centers would typically be in cooler areas because they need the ambient air coming in to be relatively cold for the process. And then for 1 megawatt data center, usually that can provide almost all the heat for a 2,000 meter square greenhouse. And then for a 10,000 meter square greenhouse, a 1 megawatt data center can provide heat for about 50 to 60% of it. And it's important to note because the data center we'll be working with will be usually for the free cool will be between 1 megawatt and 5 megawatt, as this is the typical range for using air-cooled data centers. And we'll also be using, it's also important to know that some systems use a conjunction of air cooling and water cooling, so that like some may do some of this, but also have water at the same time. But we'll be working on both systems, but for the greenhouse specifically, we're using high exhaust air. So, yeah.
All right, focusing a little more on the logistics of the heating process for the greenhouse itself. Firstly, the waste heat is captured and collected from the data center, from where it would normally be released into the atmosphere. And then secondly, the waste heat is transferred to the greenhouse. This is usually using a pipe or duct system with a simple pump. Thirdly, via generally overhead heating pipes, which are the main source of heat in the growing area, hot air can then warm the greenhouse. And importantly, the greenhouse can then be optimized for a different temperature range. This is a problem that a few studies we looked at ran into, where fluctuation in the heat output by the data center, depending on like the season or location, caused a different amount of heat that was entering into the greenhouse. As you can see in this figure, the black lines are the heat output by the data center. The colored lines are the heat required for the greenhouse. So you can see in the colder months, there's a lot more overlap, or the greenhouse requires more heat than the data center is providing. And there's a pretty simple solution to this problem, and that's just optimizing the produce being grown based on the temperature range. So vegetables can be pretty flexible in the temperature range that they're grown. So these are some examples of the optimal varieties of produce grown in different temperature variations.
Implementing agriculture within a community. Community gardens are a rising alternative to traditional farming practices. You can cultivate crops, raise livestock, grow food in these smaller, limited land use areas. So it's a good alternative to bring food sources closer, along with being good for the community and also the environment. Looking at some of our benefits, starting off with affordability and accessibility. So community agriculture brings food production closer to consumers, which reduces the distance required to obtain food. The proximity not only cuts down transportation costs and the emissions associated with them, but it also makes having fresh food more affordable and accessible. It also fosters community engagement as a large benefit. It allows people within the community to collaborate and work together in a shared space. They come together, harvest their plants, water, weed, grow food together, and kind of it just creates a strong community bond when people come together and are working together to maintain a shared space and grow food. And another large benefit is it provides an education resource within the community. It expands people's ability to learn how to grow their own food. Outdoor education is also great for kids and the youth. It provides and acts as an outdoor classroom that teaches gardening skills, teaches them how to harvest their own food, while also fostering environmental consciousness and exposing them to sustainability at a young age, which is great to kind of put that in their minds at an early age.
For future applications where we can reinvest our profits, since water is at least 50 times more efficient at transferring heat than air is, we're also incorporating water cooling data systems. So we can invest our profits in expanding our partnerships with more of the applications we can get out of the water transferring heat systems. Working with potentially urban planning departments to not just consult the data centers that's already built, but also look into like future data center planning, incorporating the system so we can utilize some of the waste heat from the data centers to go into the district heating or just very nearby community, some neighborhoods, while using a heat pump to bring that water from like around 25 Celsius degrees to maybe 65 Celsius degrees, so they can utilize that water. And we can also go into aquaculture heating, since we need to maintain a controlled cultivation for the fish, shrimp, lobster, or even algae on those farms. And potentially we can go into some swimming pools or even water parks to use that heat energy.
To wrap things up here, I know we threw a lot of information at y'all. This is kind of narrowing everything down. Is that data centers are expected to have exponential growth. We're planning to use the waste heat from data centers that's usually sent to the atmosphere to heat greenhouses. And pretty much our plan is to reduce waste by supporting local community, and a lot of facets that our project went down into, but this is the general scheme of it. So we'll end there and we'll go into sources and then sources and then questions.
Thank you. Okay, great job, y'all. I thought that this is obviously a very big problem and a very creative, innovative solution to it. I have a question from Jake asking what made you choose this project for sustainable data centers, and what are the best examples that you've seen already?
Speaking from my own personal experience, part of the reason I wanted to implement urban agriculture into our project is I actually did 3 months of qualitative research at an urban farm in a food insecure community in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a great, just a great thing. Community gardens are great. Seeing it applied and the benefits of it was amazing. So I'm really passionate about that, and it was great to apply it to our project and kind of share with my team.
Yeah. And the other major thing was like data centers. We're thinking like, how can we utilize waste in general, right? And we thought, okay, what's a very growing market right now, which everybody's talking about AI, et cetera, data centers, requiring a lot of energy, producing a lot of waste, whether it be water, heat, et cetera. So we decided to really kind of combine that with the interest in urban agriculture and whatnot, and that's kind of what we came up with.
I think we took a lot of inspiration from the geothermal energy process, because there's heat energy from geothermal, and we were thinking, okay, what's another source of excess heat energy? And we came up with data centers and ran with that. And then, do you have some interesting examples that you found?
We did apply some of what we learned visiting the greenhouse in the systems that we could work with in heating a greenhouse. I think that was really interesting to all of us. And actually, we started this project before we visited, but that kind of implemented a lot of our ideas on how we wanted to connect data centers and greenhouses, which might not seem like a usual connection that would be made.
I know I personally, had a data center, I would be super interested in this. However, I know, not all companies are, or some companies may be more concerned in like the optimization side of things. How would you, let's say you're in a meeting with them, like pitching your idea, and they're interested in like optimizing their data centers to be more profitable, but maybe not so interested in like the community impact side of things, just that's not a big priority for them. How would you try to sell that in terms of like in terms of like financial incentives?
Absolutely. So right now there's heat energy that's being sent into the atmosphere. So what we're doing is we're adding another profit stream for them. We're like, this is good for you, because the greenhouse will pay a smaller rate on the heat energy that the data center is providing. So there's the financial benefit, and then the community benefit is very apparent as well. So just adding that little incentive there.
They're already producing it.
Yeah.
Might as well make a little money off of it.
Exactly.
And also, we hope to hopefully the government's incentives will grow as time continues. Like, as our society shifts to a more sustainable society, but there'll be government incentives to do things like this to help with local agriculture and whatnot. So hopefully another incentive that's not able right now, but in the future, would be to, they would get some type of funding from the government as well, whether it be city, local, or national.
I have a question about if you looked into any like locale for this, like how does it differ between different states or areas, and if there's anywhere where this would be better applied and anywhere where it wouldn't work as well.
Yeah, so in colder climates, this is most optimal just because we can really utilize that cold air. In hotter climates, it is a lot more challenging to keep the data centers cool because it's very hot out, and the drawback with that is just that the data centers are placed close to the companies that use them just for efficiency and the energy transfer. So companies that are located in very hot climates like Arizona would have the data center close to them, and yeah, that would take a lot of energy to power that. So our vision is kind of for the future, is to also advise companies on strategically placing their corporation that would need the data center in a colder climate.
It's also important to note that for the free cooled data center setup, which we'll be using for the greenhouses, it honestly has to happen in a very cold environment because they're using ambient air to cool the data centers, and we're getting out air that's roughly at 20 to 27 degrees Celsius. So, for instance, in like a hotter environment, that temperature of the excess of the air outside, or the air that would be coming out, wouldn't be necessarily that. If we're in a hot environment, that wouldn't be that useful. The intake air wouldn't be cold enough, and the outtake air would be like, okay, it's already hot outside, it doesn't matter. But in a very cold environment, that hot stream actually matters a lot more. So just as Dana said, the cold environments would be the ideal place for this type of setup.
Cool. Nice. Any questions from the fellow Greens?
I have one. Who would be responsible of covering the cost of the infrastructure of connecting the greenhouse with the data center?
Is that me? Okay. So as we mentioned, the setup for the greenhouse initially could be through grants and government funding. And in terms of piping and the pump itself, that could be something incentivized by tax write-offs for the data center if they're feeling charitable, which would be no additional cost to the data center itself if they do the process legally and covering all of the bases there.
Also helpful to note real quick that for the process for like the this and the greenhouse, in theory, all you really need is like a pump and some pipes, so it's like not as expensive as other systems. Like if we were to expand to other like water cool systems, etc., require a lot more equipment, which would cost a lot more, which would be a different question. But in terms of for our general system, it shouldn't be too expensive. Is also thought as well. It's important to know.
The greenhouse would be pretty close to the data center itself to reduce the heat loss and then the cost from piping.
Thank you, everyone.
Last but not least,
Can I move this?
as long as it's like somewhere on here.
I'm sorry, I don't know what it is.
Oh, this is the microphone.
Oh,
Oh.
okay.
No. Present.
Are we kind of like all
Okay.
standing right over here?
Yeah, I'm just gonna start something.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
All right. Go ahead.
Ready to go? We good to go? You good? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so hi everyone, thank you all for being here today. And we are with A Renewed Education, which is a Philadelphia-based nonprofit focused on retrofitting STEM education. No, that's the last thing. Okay.
So my name is Kaylin Brown. I major in energy and sustainability at Penn State University.
My name is Jordan. I study architecture.
And my name is Anthony Sable. I'm a political science student at the University of Central Florida.
And my name is Grace Stediford, and I'm an environmental science and policy major at the University of South Florida.
And so this is our table of contents. So we're going to start out by telling you about our golden circle, followed by our sustainable development goals, then our sustainability complex, and then we're going to focus on the business model canvas, and we're going to end off with our future expansion ideas and any questions that you may have.
So this is our golden circle. What we will be doing is developing educational programs for classrooms within 3 elementary, middle, and high schools. How are we going to be doing this? Well, we're going to work with local governments and partners to provide resources for students to engage in hands-on STEM activities. Why are we doing this? Well, we want to expand interest in sustainable and renewable education amongst underserved students in the Philadelphia County School District.
And so these are the primary SDGs that we're focusing on. So number 1 would be quality education. So we are an education initiative, so we are going into schools trying to teach students and foster engagement and increase awareness of renewable energy sources and sustainable practices in our cities. And then that leads into our next goal, which is sustainable cities and communities. So not only are we teaching students about what this is, but we're also helping them to implement these sustainable practices in our cities through partnerships with Philadelphia's local solar companies. And then finally is our partnerships for the goals. As I just said, we are partnering with local solar companies in Philadelphia, and we are also working with state and local governments as well as school boards to get this all going through smoothly.
And then going into our sustainability complex. So we believe this program will have an impact on individuals by increasing cultural understanding of the environment and motivation to pursue careers in sustainability. And then that will then move on to the household, as this program will encourage familial habits related to environmental respect. And then it will also impact the community, as expansion of climate curriculum within counties and lower income neighborhoods can increase employment and college enrollment in STEM fields. And then the city, lastly, we will be helping them by creating partnerships with local solar panels to support business expansions and reinvestment of the budget for environmental policy lobbying.
So the key activities will be focused on the quality education and climate action, and our program will be particularly important for creating specialized lesson plans for students in the Philadelphia County, and we plan to partner with local solar companies as well.
So for the first part of our program, we will be targeting elementary schools. So our first key concepts are ocean pollution and environmental stewardship. So we will be doing this by creating a hands-on approach with a fieldwork activity where we will be putting perler beads in buckets of water to mimic microplastics. So we'll begin the lesson by asking children what they know is in the ocean, so allow them to be engaged and interested in what is happening outside of a normal classroom activity. And we will then break the children into groups with the volunteers creating bins of water and multicolored perler beads, and we will then instruct them to only select blue beads from the water. This will then model how it is very difficult to remove microplastics from the ocean without harming surrounding sea life. So it'll be introducing a quite difficult concept, but still allowing them to have fun.
Alrighty, so for the 8th grade students, they will be exploring photosynthesis, our excessive release of CO2, trees' role in carbon sequestration, and the devastating effects of deforestation and human-induced wildfires on our atmosphere. The field study portion of this program will consist of them calculating a tree's diameter and height to determine the above-ground biomass and the weight of carbon dioxide in the tree. So to get the height, they will be using this tool right here called the clinometer to be able to get this, what this angle would be right here. They'll repeat this process for each tree in a given plot. And finally, they will calculate the total weight of carbon dioxide stored in the plot, and then use that value to estimate the amount of carbon stored in the trees at the park they are visiting. We want them to have an appreciation for the beneficial processes that are happening all around them so that they hopefully treat them with more respect than our predecessors. The seniors will be conducting an after-school research project on solar energy. So they'll be learning about how our sun provides us with energy, PV cells, and the functioning of solar panels. The fieldwork portion allows for them to gain experience in designing, installing, and maintaining ground-mounted solar panels. Throughout the remainder of the program, they will draft a research paper analyzing solar meter output data to determine cost savings. They will assess the pros and cons of the school running entirely on solar energy. They will have to explain the strategies used for panel orientation to optimize output. So here is the design of the mount for the solar panels. Very simple. And these are just some of the materials they will have to be using. And with this project, we hope that students will see the benefits of using a renewable energy compared to fossil fuels and understand how harnessing this form of energy is relatively easy.
And then for tips of intervention, so as previously stated, we believe that it is important to foster memorable and engaging experiences for the youth. And by doing lessons outside of the classroom and allowing children to engage meaningfully, we believe that it will allow them to build essential skills and interest in the subject, as the Australian Journal of Outdoor Education states, while also possibly increasing grades, with students in traditional lecture courses being found to have 1.5 times more of a likelihood to fail than students in courses with active learning. So overall, we just believe that by doing things that allow children to engage with the topic rather than just sit in a lecture and try to just absorb as much as they can, we believe that we'll be creating a more meaningful impact.
And so we're in a unique position as not only a nonprofit, but also a nonprofit that's trying to influence the local education policies and education system as a whole in Philadelphia. So some of our key stakeholders involve the Philadelphia Department of Education, as well as the Philadelphia District's Board of Education, as well as the local and state governments and any elected officials who may represent Philadelphia County. And then in terms of our partnerships, as I said, we are partnering with Solarize Philly, which basically contracts out other solar companies in Philly. So based on their recommendation and the location of our school, we would have a different solar company depending on the location of the school. And then we also have sustainability volunteer groups, because when we go into the schools and we teach the elementary and middle school level classes, we're going to be doing that portion with volunteers. And so for our segments, for the beneficiary, that's of course the students across the different grade levels in schools. And by extension, the students are going to extend this towards their communities and their employers or colleges who may be seeking students who have more STEM education or a hands-on background, or for example, more experience with like trade type of work, with like developing systems and building things hands-on. And then the customer is of course the taxpayers ultimately, because the taxpayers are who fund the Pennsylvania Department of Education as well as the state and federal governments and all of their activities. And then the other part of our customer would actually be private grant providers. So there's a lot of private grant providers that would provide grants specifically for STEM programs or renewable energy programs. I know that Kaylin said that you're from Riverview.
Yeah, my job, Riverbend, they actually received a $10,000 grant from National Geographic to do educational programs at schools in Philadelphia.
And so then we're going to move on to our value proposition and impact measures. So for our beneficiaries, of course, students would be expected to exhibit heightened interest in STEM careers that are focused on renewable energy projects as well as sustainability. And these students would be better equipped to learn and work in places that focus on this. So for example, we would expect to see maybe increased college enrollment in STEM programs for these students, and also possibly more interest in the STEM field as a whole. And then for the customer value proposition, so Philadelphia County Schools, local taxpayers, local officials, and also grant providers, they would expect to see some sort of progress for this. So that's where our impact measures come in. So we could see increased graduation rates from these high schools. We could also see increased college enrollment rates, specifically in STEM programs, and also increased employment rates immediately out of high school.
So as for how we're going to get word out about our program, we believe that designating focus to specific school districts such as Philadelphia County will allow us to sort of concentrate our efforts. And then additionally, we believe that delivering curriculum during science classes will allow students to gain a better understanding of environmental impacts while still learning based on what the curriculum is supplying. We also believe that encouraging local student organizations and teachers to post flyers in the schools, especially for the solar panel activity, since it is an after-school program to promote engagement. And additionally, there are many magazines within Philadelphia that would likely partner with us, specifically Grid Magazine. So as you can see here, this is actually a project they have done where they are promoting the housing crisis along with the interns from high school and college. So as you can see, they are very in tune with what is going on in the city as well, and like to include the youth in it.
All right, so cost. Essentially, for the elementary and middle school programs, these prices are flat because we can continue to reuse those products for program to program. The $13,625 for the high school program, this is just for one high school, so since we'll be doing 3, this will be multiplied by 3, and that's what's in the total. The solar panel company, that's to be determined. That depends on a few factors that we don't have much insight on at this point. So the price will be determined once the project is approved and once a company is picked. Also, employees, we are the ones doing this, so I believe that we can pay ourselves, but I assume that we can't depending on where the funds are coming from. But in total, we are projecting for this program to cost about at least $50,000.
And then using that projected value of $50,000, we have sort of created a revenue table. So the William Penn Foundation and the Philadelphia Foundation are two foundations that exist within Philadelphia. They have a great record of donating around $10,000 to causes such as these, so we believe that we would be able to secure this type of funding, which would account for about 20% of our overall $50,000. We then believe that the remaining 80% could then be covered by state education funding.
And so when it comes to our surplus, we are a nonprofit, so our organization would utilize any excess funds to invest in our future endeavors. So this could be expanding our program to other schools in Philadelphia or to possibly other grade levels, specifically in the elementary and middle school lessons. It's also to assist in planning for other locations, which we're going to touch on next, and also involves investing in expertise and staff. And so we don't expect to have much of a surplus because we are a nonprofit, and also we are getting money from the government, and as a lot of people know, getting money from the government can be very difficult. But the good thing for our program is that the Philadelphia County School District has been receiving, compared to the last fiscal year, they've had a 3% increase in their education funding. So between that and also all of the grants we've been looking into, we would expect to have ample funds for this.
Okay, So we plan to expand to 3 different places, and so the first place is going to be Kern County, given their proximity to the San Andreas Fault, and we aim to complete lessons regarding solar panels, crop diversification, and electric vehicles. We also plan to expand to Miami-Dade County, given the recent court ruling called Sackett versus EPA case, which relates to clean water and wetlands. So we aim to talk about solar panels, wetland renewal, and also ocean conservation. And lastly, we aim to expand to New Delhi because of the air pollution and water pollution, as noticed by the World Health Organization, and we plan to talk about solar panels, solid waste management, and green coverage.
And then just to wrap everything up, we've sort of just broken down our program in education, community, and industry. So overall, we believe that with education, using a hands-on learning activities will give children a better overall understanding of their concepts. This will then impact the community by allowing for a more sustainable, educated community that is dedicated to working together on environmental issues, while also helping industry and the economy as promoting local solar panel companies and giving high school seniors trade experience when they are entering college. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great presentation, great idea. I have a question from Jake. Where have programs like yours been in the past, implemented before, and how have they led to long-term impact?
How do that to what? I'm sorry.
To long-term impacts.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I can answer this from personal experience. So I work at a place called Riverbend Environmental Education Center. And we necessarily don't do these specific programs at the school, but many schools actually do field trips and come to Riverbend, or we will go to Riverbend and present and do lessons there. One thing I can say is that Riverbend is very successful. We are constantly getting calls from schools. Like I said earlier, National Geographic actually provided the company with a grant because they do believe in our efforts. So personally, that's where I've seen it applied before. And there's actually programs already in Philadelphia happening now to connect students with renewable energy and finding ways for them to implement that in the city. Yeah.
Another question for your middle school proposed curriculum. I really like how sort of approachable that process of estimating the carbon sequestration for like some plot of land is. But at the end of that, you do have some numbers, and middle schoolers I know are often not so big on equations and such. How would you explain those numbers, like the product? You say, okay, this plot of land produces how much CO2, but that's just a number. How would you explain sort of the context to make that relatable to them?
So basically what I would say to them is, okay, so this plot of land sequesters this much CO2, and then we could also look at how much carbon is released in the city of Philadelphia in total. We could say this one area sequesters this much carbon, Philadelphia releases this amount of carbon, so we see that there's importance in carbon sequestration and having trees in the city especially. We could even put it on a broader scale and say, if there was some way to try to figure out the amount of square footage of forested areas in this Philadelphia, I can even explain then, like, the entirety of Philadelphia, the forested areas sequester this much carbon dioxide. So we obviously need these, especially due to Philadelphia being such an emissive city. So that would kind of be the connection for them to see, even though Philly is populated and there's not much space, we still need these trees to kind of sequester this carbon.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did you guys do any research about how this type of curriculum aligns with like current national or regional curriculum that is already in place?
So the Philadelphia County School Board, they actually have like a list of their priorities, and their top priority is creating an education system that is sustainable and focused on really building up underrepresented communities. So that's already a major priority for the city. So that's kind of why we chose Philly in the first place, because we knew a lot of schools, not a lot of funding in comparison to the amount of schools. So we really thought it'd be great to build upon that, especially because in their, like I said, in their recent goal panel, they mentioned that was a priority to represent their undervalued school districts and schools.
And then I have one more question, just because I think it's quite common nowadays to have like a kind of climate anxiety. So how do you imagine this helping with that?
Helping with our climate anxiety?
Do you think it would help with climate anxiety, or do you think, or what are your, how would you try to prevent climate anxiety through this type of education?
So one thing I've noticed just being an educator is that that basis of climate anxiety isn't established yet. So we are going to present this program in a way where they may have heard of terms like climate change and things like that, but that fear really isn't in them. So we're going to present it in a way where it's not going to scare them. It's just going to educate them and teach them. So instead of being like, hey, if we cut down all the trees in the world, then we'll die, or something like that, I'm going to express it in a way like, if we are mindful of deforestation and we continue to conserve our trees, then we will have more being able to sequester carbon, and that will reduce warming. Just presenting it in a way where it's, I don't want to say necessarily sugarcoating it, but just in a friendly manner that's understandable, but also not scary.
Yeah, I think it's important to definitely distill the information a little bit.
Yeah.
And additionally, I think by introducing these topics to someone at a young age, they're then more used to it. So as they grow older, maybe that climate anxiety could be a little bit reduced. I know, especially when I was in high school taking environmental science, it was maybe the first time I was really critically thinking about some of these topics, and it was just very scary at the end of the day.
I developed climate anxiety also in tandem with other things going on in my life. So being a child, it's I'm not saying children don't go through stressors, but adults go through a lot of other things. So kind of having that being introduced to them at a young age, kind of like how she said, it exposes them earlier on, and they might not be as scared of it. Whereas for me, it was kind of all thrown on me at this one period in my life, while also dealing with other things. So it made it a lot more scarier to accept.
And also children, just generally, a lot of the reason we did this program is because children are very hopeful. They're very willing to learn, they're very open, they're very hopeful for the future generally. And we think that's the best time to capture them and to teach them. That's why we focus a lot more on being hands-on and not necessarily saying, hey, this is a lesson on climate change. This is a lesson on how trees are important. This is a lesson on how we keep our oceans clean. We try to make the topics a lot simpler for them to understand in that way, at least up until high school, and then by that point they probably have more of a basis on climate change.
Cool. One more question, and then we'll get to the. You might have it. Yeah. Yeah, you go first. Yeah, you might have my question. So.
Oh no, I saw the STEM kind of task y'all put together. I think it's really interesting. So it's I guess how do y'all brainstorm those ideas, or do y'all find somewhere, or in terms of just how that process go? Because some are very in depth, and I like them.
So for the high school program, I just came up with that. It changed a lot depending on feasibility. For the middle school program, I actually had to basically use that same equation for a program I did in 11th grade, 10th or 11th grade, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. But I saw it and was even though this is something I did in high school, I feel like this is something that can be simplified so middle school students can be able to understand it and grasp it. Elementary school program.
For the elementary school program, I took inspiration. I used to intern at a sanctuary in Florida where I would do programs such as those. So I definitely took inspiration from Charlotte Arndt, who is the education coordinator there, where she would create programs such as that sort of introduce young children to ideas while letting them have fun, but also letting them sort of think about the environment.
And we really labeled this as a STEM program because, historically speaking, when it comes to education funding, just the general consensus around people going to college and everything, STEM's a lot more valued and it tends to get a lot more funding. We were talking about the Nat Geo grants and the Penn grants and all of those. those are much more geared towards STEM students and programs like that.
So my last question that I have for me right now, we of course love international experiential education programs, but sort of, you know, starting in Philly and then jumping to like completely different corners of the United States, and then of course going into like New Delhi as well. So I'm just curious about like the logistics of that. Would it be like your team starts in Philly and then you establish new teams in these new locations, or would you be traveling around providing these programs?
We would definitely be expanding our team, because also like we do require a bit of different expertise in different areas. So for like the Florida lessons, I know it was more focused on like water conservation, and yeah, definitely just like an expansion of our teams, so starting out small. And there's also a lot of issues with like funding, for example, like funding that you get from the Philly County can't necessarily be used across the U.S. So
or in
yeah, in another country. So yeah, it's definitely just like big future endeavors, but in general, we want to like almost do something similar to the green program, where depending on the location, we change the curriculum and focus on something. And just a fun fact, we are located in Philly, which is where the green program headquarters is located. So we could be training future greenies if we get this started. So.
Additionally, with that, I would say we don't have to physically be going to New Delhi. We could also connect with educators in New Delhi or people who find this to be important there, and kind of just communicate through the web. As Jill was telling me, she's been working with the green program for years and has never met Melissa, so these things are possible. So that's kind of how we plan on doing it as well. If we're not going there, then connecting with people and doing it there, which will also consume a lot less time and money doing it that way.
I definitely believe it would be important to work with educators that are existing in India, just because I would say we would not have an expertise in that particular field. So it would definitely be, I would say, the most beneficial to work with people who are the most passionate about that area.
Anybody else have any questions? Great job, everyone. Yeah, thank you all for your presentations, and thank you audience for attending and listening to what our brilliant students have to offer this week. Oh, you're good. Yeah, so thank you all. Okay. Still going?
We are offline.